Hello, good evening, everyone. I went to Discovery, the Twin Pond park that's way east off of, I think it's Santan Village Drive and the 202. And I used a white speed shad from Bass Pro Shops on a underspin head. I used actually a couple of them. I used the beginning with the bigger blade, actually. If I can get it in the screen. This head with the hammer, which is a number one blade, and a what's called a horse head or a Roadrunner style head from my friend Michael Harriman at Juggernaut Custom Jigs. And it's a pretty straightforward mold that he does, and I get them on sickle hooks. It's I think a 2.5 inch total. This particular one is a Kitech, but the speed shads, they're really close to the same. I've also got some that have the gold eyes, and they were pretty good too. They have a number 0 blade. I consider that more of the like the shellcracker bluegill, smaller panfish variety type head. And then in the crappie size, and it also works for trout as well. I got this one with the red eyes, white painted. It's got a number 1. I always ask for either a flat flash silver or brass or hammered. I prefer hammered. And this one, I believe, is a number 2, if I'm not mistaken. These things, now, the one thing that I change on these when I get them, and it's usually when I put them on, is I take this swivel that's actually in the lead, and I'll push it back to an angle that's kind of coming to the back, so it's more like a Roadrunner. Because with this as it is, it kind of hits that back, even though it's on a swivel, and it really doesn't allow the swivel to do its job. And you have to pull these fairly quick if they're straight down like this. His bigger ones, that's not an issue because the blades are a lot bigger and they turn just by the nature of being bigger. However, once I push that back at that angle like a Roadrunner, these things spin flawlessly. So I kind of leave them alone until I put them on. And everything I've gotten from him has worked flawlessly for what it is. Now, the thing with these that I would do, though, being straight up and down like this, is to sit there and just pop jig it with some type of a wacky rig, something on the back, so that the body is not all the way on the whole body of the hook. It's just right here, wacky style. So you have the flash and you have something wacky rig. That would work okay for me as well. And like I said, I haven't had any problems with these things tracking correctly. 90% of the time, the eyes are aligned perfectly. They clear coat them so they last a long time without coming off. They work really well. But what I've noticed, and I've got my other bodies I'm going to show in a minute, but what I've noticed really overall with underspins, now keep in mind I've done several videos on drop shot, and I am a big fan. And these bodies on drop shot can be deadly on panfish. They really can truly be deadly. And with the way that trout tend to be toward the bottom, they can even do really good for trout on the bottom. But for some reason, an underspin of a micro size like this, it just does something to the fish. And I went to Discovery. Excuse me, I'm getting sick again. This old age thing is really making it easy to get sick. But one of the things that I've noticed is that it didn't matter if I was going fast or really slow dragging the bottom. I was getting hits. And I noticed with this body, because it's very loose and that tail wags real quick with almost no motion, and the flash of the blade, they would kind of get that pepper hit that trout typically do. Or they'll come up and they'll nose beak it and they'll nibble at it. And it would be when I stopped it. And they say that for bass, that pause is where they hit it. Well, they wouldn't hit it at that point. What they would do is they'd sit there, and when you popped it again off the bottom, that's when they would hammer it. And I got a few, they were fairly small stalkers, but there was one. There's this one freaking Moby Dick, man. And I was getting them like parallel to the shore, like maybe 3 or 4 feet off the shore. Man, they were fairly shallow at that point. They were going after flies and bayfish. And I saw them all over the place. So on that particular one, I slow rode it toward the bottom, and I was kind of getting it stuck in the weeds, and I was popping it out. Well, I popped it off of one of the weeds and absolutely got hammered. I mean, it felt like Thor's hammer hit my rod. Oh my God, it was a huge freaking hit. Like, I've fished Silver Creek extensively. I fished the river salt local fairly regularly, and I've gotten some pretty decent trout. I really have, and I've been lucky in that. But this thing, I don't know if it's just been in there for a few years, just never been caught, but it was a freaking donkey trout. That thing was stupendously huge. And I thought it was a bass at first until I realized that it was tugging way too viciously to be a bass. And with trout, they just keep pulling until they're done. You're in the net, you're not going anywhere. They will not stop. So I see that flash that tells you, okay, it's a trout. Because at first I was suspicious. So I was like, okay, this has got to be a pretty decent sized bass. No, one bass. It was a rainbow. It was stupid huge. That thing had to be over 20 inches. I'm not kidding. Like, I'm not one to just exaggerate. That thing was massive. It did that turn, and it was doing that wag that they do with their head, and it popped the hook out. I was like, oh my God. It like, fishermen understand where I'm coming from when I say what I'm about to say. People that don't fish don't get it. My heart sank when I lost that fish, because that probably would have been the biggest fish of the rainbow trout variety I probably ever caught so far in my life. And I'm almost 47 years old. So, I haven't fished the rivers in Colorado or Montana or, places where they're known for big trout. I haven't gone after Chinook and lake trout and stuff like that. I haven't had those opportunities. I've had opportunities to go after a lot of trout, but it's mostly been Arizona. So to say that I was really supremely disappointed that I lost that fish, I'm really still wow. I'm reviewing my process because I didn't hard set the hook, because I put one of these out here again. The thing with sickle hooks is that no matter what size they are, their wire is pretty close to the same. They're not like other hook wire material, okay? Well, I didn't have one of these big ones on with the whiteheads when I got hit by that particular one. I had one of these, but with the size 1, not the size 0. So it had just a little bit bigger hammered flash head on it. It's a really, really small diameter hook. And now the last trout that I caught on one of these a few days ago, it hit so hard, it bent the hook all the way back. And I ended up having to completely redo my hook. So, once these, that's the only downfall, the only pitfall about sickle hooks, is that if you get a bigger fish, you're almost always going to destroy the hook. But their hookup ratio is way higher than others. So I kind of accept that. But man, this thing, good Christ almighty, was it freaking huge. I'm really sad that I lost it. I mean, I'm not going to cry over it, obviously, but pretty damn close. So I'm going to talk for a minute about these paddle tails and show you. I'm not going to take them out of the bag because they are in the minnow scent. And man, is it effing stinky. Good God. So I got two primary colors. I ordered the Kitex off of eBay because Bass Pro doesn't sell them anymore. Sportsman's has them, but it's friggin' 17 miles from my house. And to just get a 5-pack or a 10-pack of something, I'd rather just eBay it, really. Call me lazy, whatever. Color me, whatever. I am. But these are a no-name from Bass Pro. And I also had some that I ordered off eBay. And they're like I think a 2 1/4 something inch. They're just long enough for most jig heads with spin blades on them. You can do them the beetle spin way. They'll work just as good. But I've noticed also that the underspins tend to track better than the clip-on blades. And there's a lot of times where I'll actually take a clip blade and I'll wire cut it at the end, and then I'll actually needle nose it, turn it, and put a split ring on it, a real small split ring, and put it to the eyelet. That way I know that the tracking is not going to be with that funky clip. So there's a couple different ways to do it. The other color that I primarily have is this kind of dark charcoal. Now they're all together, so they look a lot darker than they really are, but they got a little bit of that flake in them, like that. And these two colors, they imitate bayfish fairly well. The green one's from Kitech to an extent too. There's some bayfish that are fairly green, but the thing with most bayfish, whether they're fathead minnows, alligator minnows, mosquito fish that you can legally use here in Arizona, although I don't know where to buy them. Bayfish of that nature, glass minnows, which we do have in our waters. People don't think that we do, but I've cast netted enough to know that we do. The pilchard minnows with the orange fins. These two colors will kind of cover that range, and if I want to go outside of that range and really imitate like a mosquito fish or a pilchard minnow, then I'll go online and I'll find that type of body. I'm kind of in the process of building up my tackle a little more. I've got a lot of tackle already, but these actually cover about 90% of what I do as far as underspins go. And I'd watched a lot of tactical bassing. And one of the things that I noticed that Matt Allen, the guy that usually has the heavier set one that usually has the chin beard going on, he talks a lot about underspins. He's much more magnum bait oriented than Tim Little is. But I noticed that they both universally agree that when it's cold outside and really inclemental in weather, that downsizing underspins is one of those ways that you just get thunderous strikes. You may not get the biggest fish that there is to get, but you'll get big strikes. And these do work, and they're not expensive at all. Now, going back to the biggest trout, so I started thinking about it. There was one about 2.5 years ago. It was the first time my still girlfriend and I had gone up to Pine Top Flag area, which is a beautiful area, man. Man, it's beautiful. Anyway, went to Fool's Hollow and Woods Canyon, I believe. And I've been to most of those lakes now within the last 10 years. And Fool's Hollow is really kind of an interesting shape. It has a decent amount of depth for a mountain lake. And there's some pretty interesting rock fascia along the shoreline in some areas, and pretty deep too, actually. And Bear and I, my girlfriend, we had traipsed along back there quite a bit on one side, and above us, way the hell up, was an RV area, and we just kind of sauntered around the shoreline, around the perimeter, and we ended up climbing like almost vertical back out of it. For her, not so bad. She's a hiker by nature. For me, a little bit different. I have arthritis and I'm a fat ass. So it was interesting getting out of there. But I had an underspin. And I think it was a Cream brand, which I really love that brand. It's been around forever. But it was a beetle spin clip-on and one of their, I think, little fishy styles. And it was a little bit bigger one. I think it was like a 2.5, 3-inch. It was the white with the red dot, which for some reason trout key in on. And I didn't know anything about it at the time. It was the first time I'd really heard the actual term underspin. Oh, I'd known beetle spins forever, but they're not an underspin. They're a top blade body on the bottom. So I'm throwing this thing, and I absolutely got just donkey slapped by this big rainbow. I actually believe that it was about the same size as the one that I had on today. Did get it in. Did get a picture of it. I know Bear has it on her phone somewhere or has it on her Facebook, but it was pretty damn big, and it put up one hell of a fight. And the thing of it was, excuse me, still kind of experimenting with lines at the time. I wasn't all the way fully into kind of what I like to use. And was using 4-pound Bass Pro Shops Excel in a brown camo. It got it in. Same net that I use today. I've had that net for 7 years. Standard, tennis racket looking, racquetball looking net for trout. And it worked. But it was still a flash blade and a moving body. And for trout, I've always been one of those ones that I've used a lot of the typical rooster tail, vibraxes, Mebs, Panther Martins, those typical, like, stereotypical trout baits. And it's still cold enough that the trout are fairly active. Now, during the summertime, they still hit in those ponds, but not as much as they do during the wintertime. And it absolutely that one just clobbered the hell out of me. So beside myself when I lost that fish. But these paddle tails and these underspins, they're a great combination. And it doesn't matter what speed they are, as long as you know that you're in that hit zone where the fish are and you vary your retrieves a little bit, you're going to kick something at some point. But the thing that I can't do anymore, now that I've been using Juggernaut custom jig heads and my friend Michael Harriman's products, is I can't go and just buy them at the store anymore. I just can't do that because the quality's not there compared to what he does. Him and his wife turn out phenomenal products. In fact, if they ever decide to do plastic mold baits, I'm probably going to buy exclusively from them at that point in time, because I am very proud of my association with them and the products I've gotten. Anyway, I just kind of wanted to go into that. And as always, I'm going to do this plug no matter what. That's the company right there. Get a hold of him. I'm telling you right now, he's got now a jig head where he's got a straight swivel point on the bottom for doing a drop shot style jig head, and it has free spin, and it's a jig head, so you can put the jig head itself and a weight on the bottom for drop shot jig fishing. He's got some great versatility, guys. I would talk to him, really.